Hi, everyone. Jen Logis with One Degree Capital. The SBA's Payroll Protection Program, as the name implies, centers around a company's payroll, its employees. The goal of the program is to keep people from having to go on unemployment and keep the economy moving forward during these unprecedented times. The program's focus on employees brings to light a lot of employment-related questions. How do you handle furloughed workers? What do you do if you've laid someone off? How do you bring them back with payroll protection? How do you decide during this if you still need to lay someone off? A lot of questions surrounding how to be mindful of termination claims, wrongful termination claims and things. So just a lot of payroll and employee-related questions centering around the Payroll Protection Act. We've invited our good friend Marc Engel, who's with Lurch, Early and Brewer, to come speak with us about these issues. Marc has been in the employment and litigation law for a long time. I won't say how many years, but he's been around the block a while and definitely can help shed some light on these questions. So, Marc, thank you for joining us, and let's kind of jump right to it. What's the one thing that business owners need to be thinking about right now as, say, they've got their payroll protection money, they're planning out their payroll for the next 60 days. What do they need to be thinking about? What are the decisions they should be considering right now?
Jen, first off, thanks very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Very nice to be with you and your audience today. Yeah, you've raised a great question. The challenges that I face in my practice every day, and I'm hearing on a daily basis, include questions about furloughs and layoffs and reduction of hours and how to manage a staff in these challenging circumstances. And what the PPP programs have done, particularly with some of the requirements for forgiveness and maintaining staff for a period of time, have effectively added a new element into that decision matrix. It's not enough just simply to evaluate staffing needs, client needs, customer needs over the short term and the midterm, and even the long term as best as you can these days, but also to see how those decisions are going to be impactful for the loan forgiveness piece. And typically what that entails is analyzing whether and under what circumstances individuals are going to be brought back to work within the timeframes so that they can avoid the forgiveness aspect of the PPP loan. It's a multi-layered analysis, and again, it requires kind of looking and planning to see what the needs are, as best you can gauge them, but also trying to calibrate bringing them back within a certain time period. These individuals who have been furloughed, which is customarily what my clients are doing now, to try to kind of hedge and see where things ultimately end up unfolding with the economy and the return to work. Some of those individuals are going to be getting unemployment, and that's an enhancement for sure. But that unemployment will need to end if individuals are brought back. Okay, so there's a lag there as well. And then there's a new timing issue depending upon what the needs may be if you need to, in turn, furlough people, say, after the 60-day period or after the end of the PPP period.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned a couple of things there about laying people off and furloughing. What's the difference?
Yeah, people use the terms interchangeably, Jen, and I get that question a lot. When I use the term layoff, I refer to it as really a separation from employment. Furlough is really more along the lines of a suspension of employment. The individual is still linked to the employer, usually unpaid, but it can be paid under certain circumstances. The advantages of having a furlough, in my view, include the connectivity with the employee. Employers simply don't know sometimes what their needs are going to be. They have good employees that they want to maintain, and placing them on furlough, allowing them to use accrued PTO, allowing them to get the unemployment which they're entitled to with the enhancement, allows for employers to maintain that relationship and then evaluate what their next steps are going to be in the next weeks and months ahead.
Gotcha. So for PPP, is there a difference between having someone be furloughed and having someone laid off? Or is
well,
it kind of
it could be.
Potato?
It's a really important distinction and something to be mindful about. If the issue is when and to what extent these individuals are going to be brought back onto payroll. If they're brought back, if they're furloughed and they're still considered employees and they're still getting paid, it's my understanding that they're going to count, so to speak, for purposes of the forgiveness analysis. If they're laid off, on the other hand, in other words, there's been an employment separation, those individuals or others are going to have to be brought back to maintain the head count to satisfy the forgiveness requirements.
Mhm. Gotcha. There's other employees, so kind of switching gears a different way. I'm also getting some questions from employers who are saying, look, we've had to lay people off. We're not sure about our PPP. There's a whole host of issues of people having trouble getting them. But they're in situations where their employees are so committed to them that the employees are saying, look, I'll come work for free. You don't even have to pay me. What are your thoughts on that? How is that? Is that great for the employer and they don't need to worry about anything, or are there some things to think about there?
Well, first off, my reaction is congratulations to the employers. They're doing a lot of things right if they have employees who are volunteering for that. That speaks to kind of the cultural issue of the organization, which is hugely important these days. But from an employment law perspective, as well intended as that sounds, for employees who really don't fall into the category of volunteers, which is kind of a separate discussion, those employees would need to get paid if they're providing work on behalf of the employer. Now, employers can go ahead and change the compensation structure going forward, and sometimes they do. They reduce hours, they can change wages at times. But if someone's doing the work, they need to get paid for it, at least the minimum wage. It becomes even more nuanced, Jen, when you have situations with so-called exempt employees who are getting paid a full salary. If you reduce the wage and you don't do it correctly, you can jeopardize the exemption going forward. So what are my employer clients doing? So sometimes what they're doing is they're advancing paid time off for individuals who may not have accrued it. They're advancing sick leave, even though nominally it may not be for that specific purpose, with the discussion and understanding that they may replenish those accounts later in the year as facts and circumstances warrant if things improve.
Gotcha. Okay. And what about, I'm just trying to think some of the other questions that our clients have asked us. Are there wrongful termination? I think is one thing that people are also concerned about, is having, discrimination claims, wrongful termination claims during this time period when they are forced to make some tough decisions. What thoughts can you share with us about that?
Again, that's a really significant point that you just made. There's a sort of almost a palpable sense that I'm getting from clients that if they're in a furlough or layoff mode, that it's just a furlough or layoff mode, and that the discrimination, pot rules and paradigms and the retaliation paradigms don't exist, and that's just not true. So it is, in my view, part of sort of the next wave of litigation that's going to be coming, because employers need to have a business justification for what they've done. When an entire workforce has been furloughed, or a substantial portion, it's less of a concern. But if you have 3 individuals in a department being furloughed and 3 others are not, it certainly begs the question why those individuals and not the others. And so they need to have, what I advise my clients is to have a compelling business justification, to look at it from a macro perspective, what the business needs of the entire organization are, and then to drill down a little bit and look at it on a more granular basis to say, why am I selecting this person for the furlough and not somebody else? Another really important fact to keep in mind is that if somebody has complained about, for example, harassment or a health issue not being accommodated, or a wage complaint, and then 48 hours later they're furloughed, it can very well invite a claim.
So it sounds like, based on the last couple of points that you've made, it seems that documentation is pretty key here. What are some ways that these employers what are some best practices that you have for documenting these types of things, so that they can avoid or have backup justification for how they're doing and making some of these decisions? What do you recommend?
I recommend really the following. In my practice, what I advise clients, I do a lot of training with managers on best practices. And a lot of these roads point back to the hiring process. In other words, are companies and organizations hiring individuals that are most likely to be successful with their organizations? Are they a fit in terms of what they're looking for from a cultural standpoint and from a professional standpoint? And do they have the emotional intelligence that most of these employers are looking for? But the documentation is critical. My view of the world is employees should not be surprised, to get a performance evaluation. The feedback and the communication should be regular, number one. Number two, employers should dust off job descriptions to make sure that they're actually accurate and relevant to what folks are doing. Number three, use those job descriptions as a foundation for evaluations. And number four, if they're going to be moving towards a layoff or a furlough, to be able to have a memorandum typically to the file that explains, this is the situation we're in, these are the factors that we considered, and these are the business reasons why we made this decision. And if you have that in place and you can communicate it with empathy and clarity, then it goes a long way to sometimes making a very difficult message easier to be perceived.
That's great. And great advice too, as well as communicating everything, documenting even more,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
as a way to try and stay on the right side of things. Marc, this has been great. If anyone has any follow-up questions for you, kind of about their specific situations, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Sure. They can feel free to call me. I'm actually working remotely these days, as just about everybody else is, at 301-509-2023. My email is mrengel, that's ENGEL, at Lurch, LERCH, early, like early in the morning.com. And my colleagues have done a wonderful job of creating a coronavirus center on our firm website, which is www.lurchearly.com, where we have all sorts of information, a number of articles that I've written for best practices, and some of my colleagues have written on business issues, tax issues, real estate issues, and so forth. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions that anyone may have.
That'd be great. We will include the links to all of that information. I know that that's all very relevant, timely, and helpful information
Sure.
to business owners. So we will be sure to include that at the bottom. If you're watching this video on our blog, we'll include those links at the bottom of the screen. So Marc Engel of Lurch, Early and Brewer, thank you so much for being here with us today. To all of those who are watching, we do, of course, hope this has been helpful for you, for your business. You've got some tough decisions to make in the days and weeks ahead, and hopefully the information that you heard here today will help you in some of those decision making. We'll keep you updated as new information arises. Maybe we'll get Marc back to talk with us a little bit more about if there's any updates with this new tranche of funds that are expected to come down. So keep posted, keep subscribing to our YouTube page, and you'll be notified when we have new videos posted. In the meantime, as always, stay well and God bless.